Thanks again for tuning in to the Replatform podcast. And if this is your first time, thanks for joining us and we hope you enjoy the episode. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. It makes us feel much better about ourselves. Okay, so let's set up the today's session and then I'll introduce you to our guest. So our topic today is getting started with BigCommerce as an agency and building apps on top of the platform. It's good timing really, because BigCommerce just announced stellar growth in Q3. I think they said like revenue is up 49% year on year, subscription up 52%. They're pushing big areas of functionality. They've folded in Bundle B2B into the core platform. Multi-storefront is live and they're on a big trajectory for that. So I'm shamelessly admitting I'm a big fan of the company and platform, and there is a buzz around the ecosystem. So we thought it'd be a good idea to reach out to one of the award-winning partners and let's get under the hood from a technical and a commercial point of view, learn more about like why do agencies choose BigCommerce, and also the reason and some ease of building out their own like custom apps for the App Store to provide additional functionality to merchants. So a warm welcome to Tom Robertshaw, who's the Innovation Director at Space 48. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for making the time. So before we ask you all our usual annoying questions, could you just give a bit of an intro to our listeners? Some will know you, others won't. Who you are, what your role is, and also just give people a flavour for Space 48 as well, please.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Innovation Director at Space 48. As you mentioned, we're UK and Ireland leading e-commerce agency. I'm set up to help ambitious retailers unlock their next phase of growth, whether that's through like a platform selection exercise and re-platforming, or perhaps increasing kind of the rate of development and things like that. Particular verticals we work in, I'd say like home and garden in particular. Clients you might be familiar with include Richer Sounds, Betty's and Taylor's of Harrogate and Ordnance Survey. Kind of where I fit into the picture, I started in kind of e-commerce industry back into 2009 when Magento was just coming out, and recognized that, oh, this is quite a cool platform. There's a lot going on here. It'd be interesting to build e-commerce websites. And so founded a Magento development agency just over a decade ago, which is sort of similar age to Space 48 as well. And did that for many years until 2017, where Space 48 acquired that business. So I sort of took my technical background, and I was the MD of that other business, and sort of became a e-commerce consultant for Space 48, helping that platform selection process, both us as an agency, as the e-commerce market was changing, to look at other platforms that we might be able to offer that kind of best sits certain e-commerce situations. But with the technical background, I could almost take those discovery workshops and build out requirements and even to sometimes technical specifications as well. So that was kind of the journey I've been on. And then kind of along comes BigCommerce for me, like around two and a half years ago. And then with some experience on the agency side and a decade in agency life, I kind of was looking for a new challenge, and I've for a while had the itch to work on products with a little bit of exposure on the Magento extension marketplace. Had a small product for a time that was almost a competitor to Built With, but never essentially went all in with it, and saw a massive opportunity with BigCommerce to sort of two birds with one stone, and go all in and have this sort of like bold initiative to create a suite of apps for BigCommerce, and that's kind of what's led me to today.
Great. Well, I'll ask the first question. So we've known each other for a while from the Magento kind of community, I guess. And I know you've worked with a lot of platforms. So Magento, BigCommerce, you've already mentioned, and then Shopify, Shopware, etc. How have you found BigCommerce so far from a technical perspective? So from working with it, maybe more as like an architect or a developer initially, and then now kind of building out products.
Sure. Yes, it's fair to say a lot of my experiences with Magento, that's where most of my development time has been spent, both Magento 1 and 2. A small amount of development on Shopify and also Shopware, albeit Shopware 5 at the time. So not their newer product. But so with kind of that context going into development on BigCommerce, there's certainly a different way of thinking. It's SaaS. So it's much more focused around APIs, much more focused around when you're building custom functionality, it's much more focused around those custom apps. So you can choose your tech stack rather than the Magento. There's a really high barrier to entry for new developers. There's training programs you need to go through. You just need time with the platform to really be able to kind of wield it, so to speak. Whereas the SaaS platforms, it's a kind of real leveler. So both with Shopify and BigCommerce, there's, you don't have to go through that training program to kind of be able to make the most of it. From a theming perspective, again, there's not much you need to know. The theme uses a technology called Handlebars, which is very similar to Liquid in Shopify. So very basic templating engine that pretty much enables you to do whatever you want to do. It's got a lot of all the information you could need and the APIs that you could need to build out your kind of incredible commerce experience. So that's great on the theming side. It has kind of improved, particularly over the last couple of years, in terms of content management. So it has this widget API and page builder to enable developers and merchants to kind of create a site that you can manage for the longevity of the platform. So you don't always need to return to a developer. So that's been really good. I think one of the initial concerns, kind of being used to the situation where you own the entire code base and you can change it, like literally anything you want. The answer is always yes. It's just like, how much is it going to cost? With SaaS and with BigCommerce, the initial concern is that if there isn't an API or the product just doesn't work that way, then you're stuck. And sometimes like there's still a process for us to go through learning kind of what are BigCommerce's strengths, what are its weaknesses, how do we work around those with kind of the use of the APIs, and then perhaps those custom apps that we might look to for projects. But it's only been a kind of conceptual change. From an API perspective, the coverage is actually like really good. And that was one of the things that I've kind of had poor experiences with the SaaS platforms sort of back in the day when in the early days of Magento, where, technology comes full circle. There were plenty of SaaSes around then. They just were very limiting and they didn't have this like API first approach. Now there actually is like really good coverage. Some platforms have rate limits. So that's something that I know that is commented on from a Shopify perspective, that API rate limits can kind of mean that you have to work around the fact that you might be blocked from making requests. So you can only make so many requests per minute or per second. With BigCommerce, that's much more flexible. So it just kind of opens more doors. Particularly around that can help for custom apps, but also just the migration process. Obviously, we're an agency, we do an awful lot of migrations from one platform to the other. And you don't want that data migration process to take too long, either when you're testing it or the actual launch itself, where you don't want to be waiting a long time and migrating customers over days because you're waiting and to try and avoid the API rate limit. So that's been kind of really impressive to us. But I think the API first approach that BigCommerce have taken, and I will talk about like new features, but that's been kind of really helpful as well, that you're not just waiting for a feature when it's like completely finished. From BigCommerce's point of view, you might have discussions with them and be involved in the sort of the discovery process of the new feature, but to get things out more quickly, just because it's sort of the right way of thinking about things. New features are launched with an API first, perhaps no user interface for it, which means that it comes quicker to market, and we can, the agency can create the solutions for each individual customer. So yeah, a positive experience. People can bring their own technology and skill sets to a SaaS platform because the APIs are so comprehensive and just, as I say, levels the playing field. So that's how I'd summarize it.
Great. And I guess a follow-on question from that, which is kind of half mine, half James's. So we've got like some notes here that we're working through, and I'm kind of combining two questions. So I remember seeing on LinkedIn, maybe even like a year ago, there was, you were kind of limited by an API. I don't know what the API was. And then you worked with the BigCommerce team and they actually went and kind of like extended it for you, and that allowed you to then achieve something. Like, how have you found they've been pretty flexible to work with? Is that kind of something you've experienced a few times? Yeah. How have you found?
That's a good memory. We were working on Ordnance Survey at the time, and that was almost pre-Page Builder, but the widget API that powers Page Builder did exist. And so when we were looking at creating a flexible way for Ordnance Survey to manage their page content, so whether that be CMS pages or their longer form product detail pages, we could make use of the widget API. We just need to provide them with essentially a user interface. And so we were kind of guided those requirements, created the technical spec, and then one of the kind of great things about BigCommerce has been like the partnership, like every stage of the process, from kind of through the sales pitch, through build and beyond. There's someone to help you. And on that project, we had a solution architect. I believe his name was Patrick Puente, who was brilliant to give us feedback, particularly when we were still kind of newer with the platform, on our approach. And we recognized there was an opportunity to simplify that integration if there was another feature on the API. So a certain way of filtering through the the widgets. And he took that away. Unfortunately, the widget API team had some spare capacity, and were able to release that within a couple of weeks, which greatly reduced our the complexity of the integration, which was great. And I appreciate you might not always want a product team to move that quickly. They've probably got higher priorities, but it was great to know that they were there for us and listening. I guess more than anything, and having been in the industry for a long time, with lots of platforms that talk about partnerships. That's certainly something that's felt a little bit different this time around with BigCommerce. So I've been really impressed with the kind of the attention that you get through projects to kind of help guide the process and understand what the best way of approaching something.
Yeah, that makes sense. You certainly wouldn't get that with Magento. And I guess in terms of kind of features and functionality as well that have been released by BigCommerce, there's been a lot over the last year or 18 months, including Page Builder, which you just talked about. What are some of the ones that you've seen benefit Space 48 and Space 48's customers?
Yeah, I think it is good to call out Page Builder again. I think it's a product that they keep releasing new features to. So it's a core part of the way that we build sites now, being able to give people that flexibility, not only to kind of build out pages, but also build out like the components. So we can always build components from our component, and they can reuse components from our library of design. So they can just, they can create new pages or things that they're familiar with and just put it somewhere else. So that has been great, kind of building out our own library internally. So we have a suite of things that are available to more merchants, and it might be a direction that we go down with our apps as well to provide more to the marketplace. So that's certainly been a great addition. Promotions is something that the team called out in particular. Obviously, with every retailer, promotions are incredibly important to be able to offer the right promotion for the right conditions of what's in the basket, price, grand total, and things like that. Over the last kind of year or so, they released a new version of their promotion. So initially, again, via API first. So we were able to kind of make use of that to programmatically create the promotions that a customer needs, but now also has got to a point now where they've created their own user interface for it as well. So that's been a really big update, and particularly like when we do offer, we've got multiple practices within the business, so that we can have teams that are really good at Shopify, teams that are good at BigCommerce, and teams that are good at Magento. It was quite noticeable, particularly when there's a lot of merchants coming from Magento looking at Shopify, for instance, and the promotions is certainly a different way of doing it. Magento was incredibly powerful with promotions, but then perhaps the UI was a bit tricky to figure out how to use. Shopify is kind of the opposite extreme, where there's a lot less that you can do out of the box, and more likely you need to get a developer involved. BigCommerce's promotions update has been kind of a really good sort of in between. Doesn't have everything that Magento might do, but it has an awful lot, and it's really easy to manage. So those are a couple of big things. But I just been really impressed, like the speed that they're going at in terms of the number of product updates. It's surprising. They have their town halls, they have their partnership announcements, their product releases, and they come in thick and fast. One of the other areas that I'm kind of impressed around, because it doesn't get enough focus often, is the accessibility. So you could see them with their strategy change over the last few years and focusing on bigger merchants and adding new features to the platform might be seen as like their number one goal. But they've gone back through their cornerstone base theme and kind of upgraded it all to make sure that it's, as a starting point, AA compliant with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Which it's just good to see. It's not it's not a sexy area of the product to be working on, but it's good to see that they're investing in all areas that are important.
That's a really nice point to pull out, actually, because I think we did an episode with the RNIB a few months back, and I think there's nearly 2.5 million people with visual impairment alone in the UK. That's due to grow to 5 million by 2030. And even if people aren't thinking about the customer perspective, from a commercial perspective alone, like alienating that number of people, and then also you're screwing up potentially indexation by making a site inaccessible. So it's really important that the core compliance is ticked off in a platform for you. Yeah, so thanks for pulling that. And one question I've got actually is around theme customization, because I've had a lot of conversations with people where people don't want to go down headless and a completely custom front end route because it doesn't suit them. There's no justification, but they don't want to be pigeonholed into a specific template which they can't change. And then theme customization gets people a little bit scared because they think, oh my God, I'm going to be off upgrade paths and yeah, it's going to cause conflicts with theme updates. Could you talk people through like how does BigCommerce enable themes to be customized so that they can be like on brand with how the business wants to build those pages without causing unnecessary headaches?
Certainly. So I think one of the first things to call out with BigCommerce compared to like the Magento style platform is one of the pitches is that you don't need to worry about the core platform upgrades. So you're not kind of applying security patches or worrying about when an upgrade is rolled out. For the core platform itself, where most of the complexity lies and it can be hidden away in the core platform and surfaced through the API, like that is upgraded like seamlessly. You don't really know when they go out. With the cornerstone, then like from a theme, if you packaged up a Magento theme compared to a BigCommerce theme, there's a lot less business logic in it. It's a lot less complex. So you build off this base theme called Cornerstone as one option. There are other themes are available, but that's their primary one that they provide. Now, when they release new features, there may be some integration work that you need to do to pull that in. So, for example, these accessibility improvements, if you're already on the platform, those accessibility improvements might be kind of in many different template files, and so that might be something that's more difficult to pull in. Whereas there'll be other features that will go through that process with the client of, you don't have to, as it were, with Magento, you always have to upgrade the theme. Like you might choose not to with BigCommerce. You start out and you kind of take ownership. It's always going to work, and then you put in kind of what you need. So that's more of a discussion than it was in the past, where we can actually say, no, this is our theme. This is the starting point, and we can then customize it to our heart's content. And because most of the functionality kind of that's being added to the platform is kind of admin interface and like server side as it were, I haven't come across many situations where there's been a sizable change that's been needed to be made to the theme to kind of earn that feature.
Cool, thank you. And so another question I've got is around the pros and cons of working with a platform, because we always say on the podcast, no platform's 100% perfect. It can't be. So I'd love to hear, like Space 48 and you as well have worked with a lot of different platforms. So I guess number one is what led a lot of the builds to go down the BigCommerce route, and then could you talk us through some of the pros and cons of developing and releasing on BigCommerce versus like the likes of a Magento?
Yeah, certainly. So coming from the Magento world, and as I say, I totally agree with your point of like horses for courses. Each platform, like there's good reasons to use it, and there's times when it's not appropriate to use. And so where we've kind of dealt with sort of people that are perhaps doing 5-10 million turnover and above, but those established businesses that are looking for further growth, they are probably coming from a Magento 1 or Magento 2. That's kind of where a lot of the market has been over the last 5 to 10 years. We'll go through the kind of evaluation process with them. Magento kind of no longer, for some people, no longer is suitable. It's kind of a much more technical ownership, doesn't meet like the requirements of their in-house team. It's not kind of where the priority should be. So kind of that rules that out. And then for us internally, yes, we're mainly focusing on the 3 platforms. So we also will consider Shopify. And put kind of forward the pros and cons of Shopify. And for some businesses, particularly those that are, dare I say, like simpler e-commerce, a simpler buying journey, then it makes an awful lot of sense. Like there's a great, the Shopify product itself is great. The ecosystem is significant. And so that's a great foundation to build your new site on. But for many customers, BigCommerce has been sort of it's resonated with them because it has more features out of the box, those features that they might come to expect from Magento, and so it's a lot less painful than kind of going back down to basics when it comes to what Shopify provides. So kind of that's our position. Like there's always a right time for each platform. It just seems to be that the space that we work in, BigCommerce fits a lot of the time for those established retailers, and it seems to be like the right where BigCommerce's strategy is. It's right that it's the target segment that they're looking to solve those retailers' needs. Whereas Shopify, has its own mission, and Magento theirs as well. Whereas for our typical merchant, BigCommerce just seems to be the right place.
That makes sense. So when I invited you to come on initially, I wanted to focus the first half of the episode on the BigCommerce platform, which you've done, and then the second half more on kind of where you've moved to now, so more on the kind of app development side, some of the things you're trying to essentially build on top of the BigCommerce platform. So maybe to start with, can you just talk about kind of why you moved more towards this kind of product role, like kind of how it came about, whether it's something you wanted to do or something Space 48 wanted to do, and then kind of how you found that transition.
Certainly. So I started probably about a year ago. Actually, I transitioned roles. We've done a lot of work at Space 48 about our growth plan. There's many e-commerce businesses. It's been an interesting couple of years. We've seen a lot of growth as an agency, and particularly with BigCommerce, and we can see the trajectory the platform is going on. So we want to continue investing in that relationship, investing in our commitment to that platform. At the same time, I was looking for kind of a new challenge. Like I'd gone through the process of kind of starting a business from scratch, going through that acquisition, kind of loving Space 48 and the team that I work with, but also just personal kind of personal challenge and a personal mission. I'd worked in an agency for 10 years, kind of doing the e-commerce consultancy wasn't enough for me, and I wanted a new challenge. And so with that kind of itch of working on products, as well as like kind of the belief that there's going to be a lot of success in the BigCommerce space, it just seemed like a perfect marrying of the two. So essentially had a chat with the Space 48 leadership team, and John in particular, and we said that's just a great opportunity for us as an agency to do that. So fortunately, we're going through some other sort of structural changes at the time, so I was able to move over incredibly quickly. We understood that an agency doing product is nothing new. One of the challenges is actually kind of seeing it through and doing it well, because client work will always take priority, quite rightly, whereas you need the kind of the long-term investment in a product and the focus. And so we were just at a stage where I could actually step out of my role as other people were changing roles as well, and I could go full speed ahead working on the apps full time, so that I knew that I was going to be focused on building the products, and I could be focused on supporting the app customers as well. So that's how it started, and I kind of started building the first app pretty much like the start of this year, and we now have 2 apps live.
So you've built, at Space 48, you built a few apps for the BigCommerce marketplace. I'd love to look at the latest one around category merchandising. Got, I guess, a couple of key questions. Is number one, why is it needed? I think helping people understand why there's a need for this type of app. But secondly, what does it do? Like, what's the benefit for an e-commerce team for using it?
Yeah, certainly. I can lay a bit more foundation as well in terms of like why we believe that the app ecosystem needed us or needed something as well. Cool. So not only like believing in the platform, we recognize that one of the great things was that it does have an established app ecosystem. BigCommerce is not a new player. A lot of the best of breed partners are already out there and on the App Store, which is great when it comes to projects and new clients coming on board. Their technology suite is already available to them. But compared to other ecosystems like Shopify and Magento, there's a lot more that you need to that retailers need to kind of get live. It's great to have best of breed, but you can't have best of breed of everything. There's a few constraints in play. And that area, I would say, was kind of weaker in terms of what the kind of apps that fill BigCommerce gaps, apps that perhaps more cost effective than the best of breed that are always having to sort of add more functionality and more complex functionality for their larger merchants. And so I was really excited about filling that gap. So working with our current clients, spending more time in the ecosystem, understanding what they needed. And so with Category Merchandiser, I can know from the experience in the ecosystem that kind of having control of the order that products show in the product listing page or the category page is incredibly important. Like there's a whole suite of rules that you might apply of when you want products to show, whether or not that's a luxury brand that wants real control over the aesthetics of how different colors of products show up next to each other, versus the more statistical analysis of which products have are best selling or have the biggest profit margin, or particular brands we need to put above another. So that's kind of like the problem space that we saw. And at the time, there was a new API that BigCommerce were launching called the product sort order API. So prior to that, really, if you were kind of just using the platform, you could only sort products on a global level. So products, if they were in multiple categories, might be shown in essentially the same order. So there's quite little control there, but then they released the ability to specify the order on an individual category level. So that sounded like a great time to build out a visual merchandiser tool. So that's kind of where it started. The first phase of providing that is just providing essentially an interface where they can drag and drop and change the order of products on a category by category basis. But like, as I'm sort of just kind of given in the intro, there's a lot of opportunity there. And so the further we got into it, while we wanted to get a first version out, it quickly morphed into a category merchandiser where, yes, being able to merchandise is great, and drag and drop those products in the right order is great. But I don't want to do that for every category and every product. I want to kind of, the approach I've taken is I want to pin some products at the top. Perhaps I want to like have fine grained control over like my best categories and the first page of those categories. But then I just want you to handle the rest. And so we provide the ability for things that you haven't merchandised, you can specify a default sort order, and then the kind of first real merchandising capability we've then built in terms of rules is being able to enable out of stock products being buried to the bottom. So it's kind of a very common requirement that we hear on projects where you don't want to kind of lose their kind of SEO value by hiding them, but you don't want them to be taking up kind of valuable screen real estate when you could be selling something else. So a couple of rules to push those to the bottom when they go out of stock, return them when they come back in, and then also for on sale products. So much like our first app, which kind of facilitates that sale management, it enables you to choose the first page of products perhaps, and then any products are on sale are then shown next in advance of like your regular sort order. So that's kind of the starting position for it, which I'm really excited about. But I also see all the further functionality you could build into without trying to get it too complicated for merchants and retailers that don't have a lot of spare time. Build in some of that business logic I was describing. That's kind of the direction that I'd like to take it.
Great. As you know, I've been involved with Klaviyo a bit, so pretty much since the start, and you were involved early on as well. And I think you built the first Magento connector, right, when they first launched?
I was involved, yes, certainly. We had Thomas Skerolaitis was the developer of that plugin, yeah.
Yeah. So, and with them, so I feel like I've seen quite a lot of like how they've struggled with maybe Magento and some of the other open source platforms from a support perspective, because every implementation is different. You've got various different modules where you can have conflicts and everything else. How different is it working with BigCommerce in particular from a support perspective? Like, how do you expect that as you kind of build out more apps to need to support those apps?
No, it's a really good question. It's definitely one of the sort of risk factors going into this is what does support look like? How do we do it well? And our experience had just been on the Magento side where, yes, to support a plugin, you almost like as soon as you get a support request, you almost need to ask for server access or an admin access to figure out what on earth is going on. So one of the beauties of the SaaS model is that you own all of it. So if there's a bug, it's on your end and you can probably see it. So that's certainly been an advantage that I don't need to kind of get access to any credentials. I don't need any sort of more privileged access than I already have. And also I can also look in advance. I can preempt because I have full access of the app's logs and what's going on. That's much easier to see when something has happened even before support request has come in. So that's been good. I think what I underestimated in kind of in that regard is that it's called SaaS for a reason. Like you are hosting this app and everything that it does, it needs to be operational all of the time. And so my experience in Magento extensions is you kind of build a feature and then you push it out to market and everyone else gets to kind of run it from an operational point of view. And you might get a few bug reports here and there to solve. This is very much something that you run and operate. And like I, as the app provider, it's my concern to make sure that it's running optimally for everyone, and I get to see that. So there's certainly a lot more involved than it was when it was just a case of building the feature and pass it on to somebody else. There's certainly work that you have to do to make sure that it's working well.
Got a related question to that. I think this will help people listen who aren't so used to these SaaS platforms, haven't worked on before. Everyone talks about one-click install as being a big advantage. Like, there's an app store, Shopify's got it. BigCommerce, other platforms like Shopware are building them out. All you got to do is pay for the app, click, it's installed. Hey presto, it works. Can you just clarify the point? Is it really that simple? If you're a BigCommerce merchant and you install your category merchandiser and it's successful, is it instantly the functionality and features in the back-end admin panels to use?
Yes, yeah. They can particularly those features that are kind of consuming the API, and that feature, while it affects the front end, doesn't add any JavaScript or anything, doesn't make any theme changes or anything like that. So it's purely a feature that the app that powers and communicates with the API. So with the single click install, the single click install process is essentially authenticating the app, giving it an API request to API token to be able to make requests in the future. And so that's really where I see the key advantage of SaaS. And I know that technology comes in cycles, but I can't see where SaaS goes away and you go back to kind of owning the entire platform for these style businesses, because the businesses that are going to succeed are those that can plug and play each different app and being able to kind of move quickly with minimal development effort, try things out. That's one of the beauties of the app world I found so far, is that stores can install it, try it out, uninstall it. I know that sucks. I want to keep them, but it's great that they can do that. It's so empowering for the e-commerce teams to be able to do that, rather than kind of do a bit of research of extensions, kind of submit a ticket to their development partner and wait a few weeks to kind of prioritize and get it scheduled in. And you can still have staging environments and staging stores to be able to kind of, if you want a little bit more protection, you can test things out there. There's always times when there's customizations of the front end experience you might want to do, and so it's not like there's never any development. But certainly, I think the businesses that are going to succeed are those that can move more quickly. They're not going to return to everything as a custom development project that needs 3 week scoping and a 4-month development time. You can reevaluate your partners more regularly. And I think that's going to, with the pace of change, I think that's what's really going to make a difference for businesses. And this isn't just in the e-commerce space. I think that's a wider trend as more and more products and platforms communicate better over APIs. This is, I think, a big change on an industry level.
Yeah, and I also think that there is a conceptual shift that client teams need to go through in terms of not everything's in the platform, because a lot of time you get, but Magento and Salesforce have this, and then but BigCommerce and Shopify don't. And the question isn't do or they don't they, it's how do they, and they do it differently. And I think you're right, that ability, I work with clients a lot, and so does Paul, to say, what's your MVP? You can't launch every single feature you could possibly want because you'll never go live. And often the advantage of this app stores is to take an app and turn it and say, right, that will do the core functionality, and the cost model is absolutely fine, and we do that. And maybe there's a higher enterprise level solution that requires more integration, and the business case is 2 years away, and you can live with the current app, which doesn't have the same level of functionality, but you can then turn it off and move to the next level if you need to. I think that kind of conceptual thinking is part of the evolution in e-commerce at the moment.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree with that, and I think that one of the most difficult things, putting myself in a retailer's shoes, is they're going through this platform selection process. They're used to everything being yes or everything being possible, and then so that kind of you never. I think Paul's mentioned it before. You never get fired for choosing IBM or back in the day Magento. Whereas then the platform market changed, and the rise of SaaS made people have to make that trade off. But yes, I appreciate there's times when that trade-off is frustrating, but actually the speed that you can go at by accepting a smaller set of requirements or slightly less complexity in the final product, you can actually, the beauty that I've seen in the last few years compared to kind of the first 5 years of kind of my e-commerce career, is that not kind of wasting time spinning wheels, building out everything just to be unique on your the way it works. Much more e-commerce teams are actually spending time growing the business rather than fighting fires or scoping things out to the nth degree. So I feel everyone's a lot happier for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is, in my opinion, this is where Magento and Salesforce went wrong. I think they were a bit too late to this. Like the example I always use is with some of those platforms, you can spend 30, 40, 50 grand changing payment gateway. And in a BigCommerce or a Shopify, it's configuration, and that's a big part of people's budgets. So yeah, that whole piece around kind of control has been a big thing for ecom.
Yeah.
So I'll ask the next question. So with the apps that you're building, so you've obviously got, I think it's 2 live at the moment with BigCommerce, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
And is the goal to move into other platforms? Because I know you've got like a roadmap of other apps you're looking to build, or is it for now that you're looking to stick with BigCommerce?
Now, certainly, like BigCommerce is my focus and our focus. I appreciate like the agency is considering multiple platforms from the agency perspective, but from the apps perspective, never say never. But all of my attention is on BigCommerce. There's so much opportunity there. I've got a list as long as my arm in terms of the apps that we could be doing, and I'm really excited about like tackling each and like every one of them. Although I know practically speaking that's not going to be possible. But right now the focus is solving that need in the BigCommerce space and supporting others. Like much like the e-commerce industry itself, I think there's room for multiple e-commerce platforms. Similarly, I want to see other app companies and companies building apps come to the market as well, facilitate the community in kind of learning how to go about doing it. So that's kind of part of my mission as well. But no, right now is just kind of full speed ahead on creating as many different apps as possible to enable those retailers on BigCommerce.
That makes sense. I think when you look at how companies like Bold have grown in the Shopify space, like the growth of like I think they were like 200 people before they kind of like pivoted a little bit. And with BigCommerce growing so much, I think there's loads of opportunity. And then last question for me. So it's a bit of a tangent, I guess, but we've talked about some of the new features and kind of how the platform's improving a lot. Multi-store being released is quite a big thing for, I think, a lot of people that have looked at BigCommerce historically, or even, the SaaS platforms generally. It's not something that has been a big strength for them, or the Shopify and BigCommerce anyway. How have you looked at this? What do you think if you have, and how does that impact your apps?
Oh, good question. So I've had beta access. So with many of the like new features, kind of privileged enough to kind of either being interviewed through the discovery process, or kind of have an opportunity to feedback on API documentation or actual kind of early releases of the product. And so I've seen what they're doing with multi-site. I can't say that I've kind of tried it out in earnest. I'm sort of waiting for it to kind of stabilize and see what opportunities there are to kind of facilitate the launch of it, perhaps with apps, if there's some spaces, which I'm sure there will be in the product. But I think it's a big deal for the platform. Like you said, it's been a big differentiator for Magento compared to kind of Shopify and BigCommerce. And so it's going to be, right now, it's probably the deciding factor. And a lot of the times, I think it's been refreshing at the same time to see people launch like multi-sites just through multiple instances of a SaaS platform. And actually, there's no one size fits all for like a multi-site approach, which is probably why it's so difficult to launch as an e-commerce platform vendor. But I think it's a big part of kind of BigCommerce's continued growth, its strategy around kind of servicing kind of that market, because it's so applicable to so many different size businesses that multi-site is going to be a kind of a key to unlocking another set of customers. So I think it's all part of their plan. I'm looking forward to seeing it more over the coming year.
Excellent. Thanks very much. That's all of our annoying questions for today. I guess just one last thing is, if anybody wants to explore any of these like technical or commercial topics in more detail, wants to find out more about the apps and how they really work in anger, how do they reach out?
Well, me specifically, you can email me at tom@space48.com and Bobby Shaw on Twitter. The apps themselves are on the App Store if you search through that for Space 48 or our website.
Amazing. In fact, Tom, thanks ever so much. I always enjoy listening to you talk. I love the passion you've got for e-commerce and technology. So thanks for taking the time. Hope we haven't scarred you emotionally today.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks as always to everyone who's tuned in and listened. We really appreciate you taking the time. Keep an ear open for the next episodes, and let us know of any topics or guests you'd like to see us feature, but do tell us why. If you haven't already subscribed, please do, and we'd love a rating on Apple or Spotify. It helps us with our visibility. Take care. Look forward to catching up on the next episode.
For more information on this topic, head over to replatform.fm for our audio podcasts. To discuss a project, or if you'd like to chat about any of the topics covered in this episode in more detail, please reach out to myself, James Gurd, or my co-host Paul Rogers via LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and keep your ears peeled for the next episode.